You're watching Northern Crimes.
Over the last few months, we've explored numerous cold cases from Oregon. These are real-life stories, haunting, sad, mysterious, and disturbing. For the families and friends left behind, it's a never-ending cycle of pain, grief, and unresolved emotions. And for law enforcement, it means countless years of frustration, a lack of evidence, and a meandering path of dead-end leads. At times, a ray of light might emerge, a cold case is solved, but for every family that finds resolution, 10 more are left searching for answers. The cases continue to pile up. This is part 2 of 5 unsolved cold cases from Oregon, and this is Northern Crimes. On the morning of June 4th, 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman proudly arrived at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon to showcase a science project. By all accounts, it was a day of excitement for the second grader. But as the hours passed, something went terribly wrong. Kyron never made it to his first class, and by the afternoon, he didn't return home. The disappearance of Kyron Horman sparked the largest manhunt in Oregon's history, a mystery that continues to haunt his family, the community, and investigators more than a decade later. Kyron Horman was a curious and bright child with a love for science and nature. Born on September 9th, 2002 in Portland, Oregon, Kyron was adored by his parents, Desiree Young and Kane Horman. Despite his parents' divorce, Kyron's family was filled with love and care. At the time of his disappearance, Kyron lived with his father, Kane, and his stepmother, Terry Horman, along with his half-sister, Kiara. His biological mother, Desiree, remained actively involved in his life. Kyron had a particular interest in forensic science, and he was known to wear a CSI t-shirt, which he was proudly sporting on the day he disappeared. On the morning of June 4th, 2010, Kyron was dropped off at Skyline Elementary by his stepmother, Terry Horman. The school was hosting a science fair, and Kyron was excited to present his project on tree frogs. Terry took photos of Kyron with his project, which she later posted on Facebook. According to Terry, she saw Kyron walking toward his classroom at 8:45 a.m., but he was never seen in his class that day. At 3:30 p.m., when Kyron's father and stepmother went to meet him at the bus stop, Kyron was nowhere to be found. After calling the school, they learned that Kyron had been marked absent all day, and within hours, a massive search began. The search for Kyron quickly became the largest missing person search in Oregon's history, involving over 1,300 searchers from multiple states. Law enforcement scoured the area surrounding the school and Sauvie Island, where they believed Kyron could be. But despite the vast search efforts, no trace of him was ever found. Investigators soon turned their attention to Terry Horman, the last known person to see Kyron. In the days following his disappearance, Terry failed 2 polygraph tests regarding the events of June 4th. A landscaper also came forward, claiming that months before Kyron's disappearance, Terry had attempted to hire him to kill her husband, Kane Horman. This bombshell led Kane to file for divorce and obtain a restraining order, but no criminal charges were ever filed against Terry. 14 years later, Kyron's disappearance remains unsolved, and no one has been charged in connection with the case. The investigation remains open and active, with law enforcement still seeking any new leads. Despite the suspicions surrounding Terry Horman, no concrete evidence has been found linking her to Kyron's disappearance. Kyron's mother, Desiree Young, continues to push for answers, and she even filed a civil suit against Terry, accusing her of kidnapping Kyron. Though the lawsuit was later dropped, Desiree has never given up hope that one day she'll find out what happened to her son. The pain of Kyron's loss is a constant for his family, with Desiree describing the feeling as having a, quote, hole in your soul. Yet the question remains, what happened to Kyron Horman? On the evening of November 19th, 2011, 23-year-old David Grubbs was walking home from work in Ashland, Oregon, just as he had many times before. But that evening, tragedy struck. David was brutally attacked on the town's bike path, suffering a fatal wound from a sharp-edged weapon. Over a decade later, his murder remains unsolved, leaving his family and the entire community devastated. David Grubbs was well known and loved by his community. Friends described him as kind, gentle, and full of life, a person who went out of his way to make others feel welcome. David was passionate about music, a fan of video games, and was known for his friendly demeanor. He worked at a local grocery store, Shop and Cart, where coworkers and customers appreciated his positive attitude. David had no known enemies, making his senseless death all the more shocking. On the night of the crime, David left work and began his usual walk home along the well-traveled Ashland bike path. At approximately 5:30 p.m., his body was discovered by a passerby. Initially, it was believed David had been the victim of a gunshot, but further examination revealed that he'd essentially been decapitated, a savage attack with a bladed weapon. Despite a thorough investigation, no murder weapon was found, and no witnesses came forward with key information. The Ashland Police Department immediately launched a large-scale investigation, following up on hundreds of tips, interviewing David's friends, family, and coworkers. Given the unusual nature of the attack, police investigated a range of possible motives, including whether the murder could have been random or connected to David's interests, such as online gaming. Unfortunately, these leads went cold. One person of interest emerged in the case, Christian De Laurentiis, who is currently serving a life sentence for a different crime. However, no direct evidence has linked him to David's murder. The FBI has also assisted with the case, but despite these efforts, no one has been charged, and the murder remains unsolved. More than a decade later, David Grubbs' murder continues to haunt Ashland. The Ashland Police Department remains committed to solving the case, with new detectives assigned to investigate recent leads. A reward of over $21,000 is still being offered for information that leads to an arrest. David's family and community, they deserve answers, and anyone with information is urged to come forward. Until then, the case remains a heartbreaking mystery, and David's memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew him. Zachary "Zach" Porter was a 25-year-old single father, beloved by his family and friends. On July 23, 2013, he left his home in McMinnville, Oregon, to sell his motorcycle to a buyer he'd connected with on Craigslist. It was supposed to be a simple transaction in Coos County, but Zachary never returned home. What happened after he sold the bike remains a heartbreaking mystery, leaving his loved ones searching for answers over a decade later. Zach Porter was known as a responsible and caring father to his young son. He was also the primary caregiver for his disabled mother and grandmother, displaying a maturity and sense of responsibility far beyond his years. Zach's close-knit family described him as a loving, humorous, and deeply dedicated person whose absence has left a void in their lives. He had dreams of starting a business in Los Angeles and was working towards securing a future for his family. On July 23, 2013, Zach left home to meet with a buyer in Coos County, Oregon, to sell his motorcycle. After arriving safely, Zach sent a text message to his father confirming that the sale had gone through. However, later messages sent from Zach's phone raised concern. They contained unusual punctuation that Zach never used, leading his family to believe someone else may have sent them. That evening, Zach didn't call to say goodnight to his son, something he never failed to do when away from home. Zach had told his family the buyer would drive him home, but the buyer later told authorities that Zach had arranged for a friend to pick him up at the Myrtlewood factory in Coos County. That friend has never been identified. The trail of Zach's whereabouts goes cold after he left the motorcycle sale. No one has seen or heard from him since. Zach's disappearance led to an extensive investigation. Authorities confirmed that he completed the sale of the motorcycle, but beyond that, the details became murky. The buyer of the motorcycle was named as a person of interest, though he denied offering Zach a ride home and again claimed someone else had arranged to pick Zach up. Investigators tracked Zach's phone, but there were no definitive answers. Despite search efforts along highways and in the area around Myrtlewood Factory, no trace of Zach was ever found. Zach's family has always suspected foul play. They believe Zach would never willingly abandon his son, whom he adored. His parents, Myron and Rebecca, have tirelessly advocated for their son, hoping to bring him home. Rebecca has said she would be grateful for any part of Zach, even just a tooth, to have something to hold on to or bury. Over a decade later, Zach Porter's disappearance remains unsolved. Listed among Oregon's missing Indigenous persons, his case was included in a 2021 U.S. Attorney's Office report on missing and murdered Indigenous individuals. Despite ongoing investigations, no suspects have been charged. On November 8, 2019, Graciela Garcia, a 49-year-old hairstylist and beloved mother of four, vanished from her home in Hermiston, Oregon. Her sudden disappearance left her family and community baffled. What happened to Graciela that night remains a mystery, but her loved ones continue to hope for answers. Born in Mexico on October 6, 1970, Graciela immigrated to the U.S. as a young girl and settled in Hermiston, Oregon. She was a dedicated mother, wife, and business owner. Graciela operated Carai's beauty salon from her home, where she was a well-loved hairstylist. Known for her outgoing personality, she was also an avid gardener and loved to travel, often attending hair shows for her profession. Graciela was close to her family, sharing custody of her 14-year-old son with her ex-husband and staying in constant contact with her grown daughters. On the evening of November 8, 2019, Graciela had plans to bring dinner to her 14-year-old son who was staying at his father's house. However, it was Graciela's husband who showed up with the food, telling her son that Graciela had already gone to bed. That night, Graciela's son received text messages and missed phone calls from her phone, but attempts to call her back went unanswered, raising immediate concern among her family members. The next morning, Graciela's husband told her daughter that he didn't know where she was and that she wasn't home. By November 11th, after no contact from Graciela, Her family filed a missing person report. Authorities quickly deemed her disappearance suspicious. Graciela's phone, passport, and ID were all missing, and her phone last pinged near Washington Bridge before being turned off. Hermiston police launched an investigation, receiving assistance from the Oregon State Police and the FBI. Investigators searched locations frequented by Graciela, including her home, and questioned her husband. According to police, Graciela's husband was cooperative, consenting to property searches and providing DNA samples. Despite this, no solid leads were uncovered, and no persons of interest were named. Graciela's family remained active in searching for her, raising awareness through social media and fundraisers. However, months after her disappearance, investigators still lacked concrete evidence. Suspicion lingered around Graciela's husband, but no charges were filed. The community and Graciela's family are still desperate for any new information that could lead to her whereabouts. As of today, Graciela's case remains unsolved. Her family holds out hope that she still will be found, yet the lack of answers has taken its toll. Graciela's daughter, Gabby, has opened an Etsy shop to raise funds for a private investigator and legal fees, hoping to reignite attention on her mother's case. The Hermiston police continue to follow any new leads, but the mystery of Graciela's disappearance endures. In late June 2020, 45-year-old Fauna Frey set out on a road trip to Grants Pass, Oregon, to distribute her late brother's belongings. However, Fauna never returned, and what was supposed to be a short journey became one of Oregon's most puzzling missing persons cases. To this day, no one knows what happened to her. Fauna Frey was a 45-year-old woman from Dexter, Oregon, known for her love of nature, hiking, and her family. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, stood about 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed between 135 and 150 pounds. Fauna had faced deep personal loss, her mother in 2004, her sister in 2006, and just days before she went missing, her older brother Dallas had passed away. Fauna, who found her brother's body, was devastated and grieving. At the time of her disappearance, she was running a family business with her father and brother, building and selling homes. She was described as a strong and caring person, and her family and friends were her priority. On June 27, 2020, Fauna left her home in Dexter, driving her dark blue 2000 Jeep Grand Cherokee to visit friends of her late brother in Grants Pass. She was carrying around $25,000 worth of silver coins, part of her plan to distribute Dallas's belongings. She visited one friend, leaving a portion of the coins, then checked into a Super 8 motel. The next day, June 28th, Fauna made several purchases at local stores, including camping supplies and clothing. She returned to the motel that night, but the following morning, June 29th, she left the motel between 8:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. and never arrived at the Wiosku Inn where she had a reservation. 3 months later, her Jeep was found on a remote road near Gallus, Oregon, but Fauna was nowhere to be found. Some personal items were still inside the vehicle, but the silver coins in her purse, they were missing. Fauna's father, John Frey, reported her missing on July 5, 2020. Despite extensive search efforts by law enforcement and search and rescue teams, no trace of Fauna was found until her Jeep was discovered. Investigators found no immediate signs of foul play at the scene. In a bizarre turn, a saddlebag with Fauna's name stamped on it was discovered west of Grants Pass on Fish Hatchery Road, an area linked to suspicious activity. Fauna's father believes this could be a critical clue. Additionally, a box of unused hair dye was found in her Jeep, raising questions about whether she'd planned to change her appearance. It was later found out that Fauna had also picked up a hitchhiker during her trip. This was an unusual action for her, though authorities have since ruled the hitchhiker out as a suspect. Fauna's phone and laptop were left at home, as she'd been using a burner phone on the trip, making digital tracking difficult. Fauna's case remains open and under investigation by the Josephine County Sheriff's Office and the Oregon State Police. Despite extensive efforts, no significant leads have emerged. Fauna's father has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to her whereabouts, and the discovery of the saddlebag has sparked hope for new clues. Oregon's unsolved cold cases contain mysteries that leave us with more questions than answers. From the haunting disappearance of young Kyron Horman to the bizarre circumstances surrounding Fauna Frey's final days, these cases represent lives cut short, families left in limbo, and communities forever changed. The investigations may grow colder with time, but the search for truth never fades. Will the next breakthrough come tomorrow, or will these cases remain unsolved, buried in the shadows of Oregon's beautiful yet unforgiving landscape?